Hello and welcome back to the Joyful Soul Creates. Charlotte here, and today I am creating with products from Sweet and Sassy Stamps as part of a giveaway hub which is open worldwide. All the information on the giveaway is in the description box, so be sure to check out down there to find out how to enter for a chance to win a $20 gift code to the Sweet and Sassy Stamps online shop. So let's get started with my project. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make 3 interactive birthday cards using some of the digi stamps from Sweet and Sassy. The images I have used for my cards are Monty Monkey, Blast Off, which I used the image and the sentiment, and also Soar Above, which I used the image and the clouds, as well as the child birthday sentiments. And I coloured these in with Spectrum Noir Illustrator markers. You can find the full colouring on my Patreon page if you want to see that. There's a link to that in the description box below. I then fussy cut them out and went around the edges with a black water-based brush marker just to make them look a bit more finished. With all of those ready, we can start making the cards. And the first card is going to use an action wobbler with the monkey. And for the background, I'm going to create a simple wreath with some monstera leaves. So I used the action wobbler just to help me work out where that monkey is going to be positioned. And then I'll use the monkey as a guide for where to position my leaf. This leaf is from Skull and Crossbuns Tropical Party stamp set. And I'm going to be stamping it with Altenew ink in Evergreen. And as you can see, I have a little helper assisting me with my card making. You may also hear cats in the background trying this voiceover. So once I have the cat out the way, I'm going to start stamping on my green card base using the Evergreen ink that I mentioned, which is a very dark green ink. So I'm just going to stamp one circle of these leaves, and I'm using the Gina Wreath builder for this. My card base is obviously bigger than the Wreath builder is designed to be used with, but as long as you put the correct corner of the card base into the corner of the Wreath builder each time, that's not going to be a problem. You'll just be left with an offset wreath, which is not an issue, but if you want your wreath to be centered, then you can just stamp it onto a panel of appropriately sized card instead. Next, I'm going to add my sentiment to the card base. The sentiment is printed on Nina Solar White, which is what I printed all of my digi stamps onto. And I've cut the strip down to have about 1/2 centimetre above and below the sentiment, and then also the width of the card. And I'm going to use some Love from Lizi peel-offs to edge that panel and give it a more finished look. The peel-offs I have chosen are the Brown Mirror Pinstripe peel-offs, and I'm using I think the medium-sized width here. And I'll trim off the overhanging pieces and put them back on the sticker sheet because they can be used on a future project. Then I'm just going to check the action wobbler, and the circle pieces are quite large, so I did trim the top one down to fit better behind the monkey. I got this particular wobbler in a card kit recently. You could trim the lower circle down, the one that's going to be on the card base as well, but I decided because even when it's trimmed down that's going to be visible from the sides, I thought I'd leave it uncut because that will look neater than trimming it. This wobbler did not seem to have adhesive backing on it, so I'm using Glossy Accents to adhere it to the monkey. Glossy Accents is nice and strong, so it works well for this. I'll hold it in place for a little while so that glue can set, and then I'm going to adhere it to the centre of the wreath, again using the Glossy Accents. And of course I can't resist having a play with it and checking how it works. With this monkey on the wobbler, I would suggest printing it on a heavier card if possible. I used the 80-pound Nina Solar White for all my digi stamps, and that is a little bit lightweight for the monkey with flicking it to make it wobble. It works, but I did almost bend the leg when I was flicking the leg, so that's just something to bear in mind. You might want to use something heavier instead, or just make sure you always flick from the head, which is a bit sturdier, and that's what I ended up doing instead. And off camera I did finish off with a little bit extra embellishment. I added 3 adhesive backed drops, they're like glitter drops, which again was from a Love from Lizi card kit. I thought these ones worked really well because they're brown with glitter in, and the glitter has a kind of greeny colour to it, so it fits really nicely with the colours of the card. And that completes the Action Wobbler card. So then we're going to move on to card number 2, which is a flying plane. So here's the aeroplane from the Soar Above stamps, and I wanted to create a light blue background panel, and I had this light blue card which I thought was perfect, but I didn't have a big enough piece, so I've pieced 2 pieces together to make it card front size, and I've just attached it with washi tape at the back. I also have a strip of darker blue cardstock which I'm going to put across that join to hide it. I decided to emboss the darker blue cardstock, and I'm using an embossing folder that has birds on it. I could not find this particular embossing folder online to give you a link for it. I will try and have another look, otherwise I'll see if I can find an alternative to link to, and all those product links are in the description box. But you could use any embossing folder here. I actually wanted to use one with clouds, but apparently I don't have one. I could have sworn I did, but I could not find such a thing, so I must have imagined it. And in any case, most of this is going to be cut away, and it actually gets slightly flattened again when it's run through the die cutting machine to die cut it. So it really doesn't matter all that much what you use to emboss it, or even you could leave it just plain and not embossed. Whatever you decide to do, you next want to adhere that piece over that dividing line on the blue panel, or if you're using a proper panel that's not been pieced together, then just across the middle. I'm then going to again use some Love from Lizi peel-offs to edge the strip and give it a more finished look. This time I'm using ice blue mirror peel-offs, again the pinstripe peel-offs, and I think I used the narrowest this time, but you can use whichever size you prefer. As before, I'm just carefully butting them up against the strip, pressing them into place, and then I will cut off the overhanging pieces and put them back on the sticker sheet for future use. Next, I'm going to die cut an oval from the center, and I'm using a Lawn Fawn stitched oval die for this. I made sure to choose one that's big enough to fit that aeroplane, and I did a decent job of centering top to bottom, but apparently did not pay any attention to centering it from left to right, so it's off center. I also forgot to remove the sticky from my washi tape. You can tell I'm a bit out of practice from crafting, and it did tear slightly the center of the oval. I'm not using that oval on this card anyway, so it's not a huge deal, but it would have been nice to use that for something else in future, and now it's torn, which is a little bit annoying. And also where the paper is thicker from having the extra layer, I did need to use my craft knife to go along the cut of the die cutting and just loosen it up and make sure it had cut all the way through so I could remove it. Then I'm going to flip the panel over and add foam tape on the back, just a single layer to start with. We'll be adding another layer later. And I checked how it looks on my card base. This card base is decorated with the clouds from the same digi stamp set. The clouds are actually, they're a black outline, but mine printed strangely because my printer ink was low. I actually quite like the way it looks, but I don't know how you would exactly recreate that. You could print it in grayscale, I guess, rather than in black and make it paler. That might work. Okay, now we're going to move on to creating the interactive portion, and you're going to need some clear thread for this. I cut a piece that's wider than my card base, just a little bit. You don't need it a huge amount wider. I'd say maybe an inch. I didn't really measure it. I'm then sticking the thread to a piece of washi, and I also put some glossy accents just to make it more secure. And I'm going to use that washi tape to adhere the thread to the back of my aeroplane. Then I'll position the plane into that opening on the panel, and I'm going to peel up the backing on the long bit of foam tape that's on the right hand side, and I will put the clear thread so it's going across that, and then put the backing of the tape back down, just hold it in place temporarily, and I'm going to repeat that on the left hand side. So you're sticking the clear thread to the foam tape, and I still have some of that thread overhanging, which I'm going to loop around in a minute, and I'll explain that when I get to it. So here's a quick look at what that looks like and a little play at seeing the aeroplane fly. Now we're going to put a second layer of foam tape over. So when sandwiching the clear thread between the 2 layers of foam tape, do make sure you remove the backing from the first layer of foam tape, otherwise your second layer is not going to stick properly. I did also put a single layer of foam tape on the back of the aeroplane, but you do not want to remove the backing from the side that's going to be against the card base, because otherwise your aeroplane's just going to stick in place and not move, which will look nice, but it's no longer interactive. So make sure you don't remove that. It's just there to add a bit of stability. Then I'll remove the backing tape on those edge pieces again, and I'm going to bring the ends of the clear thread over onto that foam tape. Again, I'll add a little glossy accent to make sure it holds properly. I'll remove all the rest of the backing paper from my tape, and then I'm just going to adhere that to the card base. You might be able to see there is in the lower right hand corner of that oval a sentiment that I printed on the background. I decided I didn't like how the sentiment looked, so I'm going to cover it up. I didn't want to reprint the whole thing because that seemed like a waste of paper, and I knew I could make it work. So first of all, I'm going to die cut another sentiment. I'm using the same blue card that I had used for the dark blue strip that I'd embossed. And where this is overhanging, the oval, the opening, I don't want it to stick to that cloud background because then it would be bent. So I decided the best way to do this would be to only partially remove the backing paper. So the bit that's overhanging that opening still has the backing paper on it, whereas the piece that's stuck down obviously doesn't. With these kinds of intricate dies, I usually put the tape on the back of the card before die cutting, so you already have that tape in place. So I'll press that into place using the negative as a guide to get the position correct. An alternative, if you don't want to leave that backing in place, is that you could remove all of it, and then once you've got it stuck down, carefully lift up the bit that's overhanging and use your anti-static powder tool on the back of it to remove any stickiness so that it's not going to stick down. That didn't entirely hide the sentiment that I had on the card base, so I went through my stash and I found some clouds that I already had die cut. These are actually the inner pieces of the Lawn Fawn puffy cloud frames. So I just trimmed down 3 of them and adhered them into place, one hiding that sentiment that didn't print properly, and then a couple of others just to fill out the design, and that completes the flying card. Then we're going to move on to the third and final card, and this one's going to be using the rocket, and we're going to create a slider card. I decided to use a blue card base because I'm going to be covering with a blue paper. You can use white if you prefer, but I have a lot of coloured card bases on hand, so I've been trying to use them. And then we're going to cover the whole of the front of the card base with double-sided tape. So I like to have this really wide tape that I can cover a whole piece like this. You can use strips of double-sided tape if that's what you have. I just find it's really easy for adhering big panels if you have these big pieces of tape. So I'll trim away the excess with my craft knife. Then I'll use my bone folder just to make sure it's really stuck down. And I'm going to peel up just one corner of the backing paper on the tape, bend it back, and then get the starry paper into position. And then I will peel back the backing tape from underneath as I'm pressing the paper into place, and this will make sure it's nice and smooth and properly in position. The paper I'm using here is actually some leftover wrapping paper. This is a great way to use it up, and I thought it was a perfect design for this card. You could use pattern paper, or you could create your own galaxy background if you like. I'm going to create my slider mechanism. So I have a piece of acetate and I'm adhering it to the rocket with double-sided tape, and I'm then going to adhere the other end of it to my strip, which has the sentiment on, and I've rounded the corners. Just the corners on the left hand side, the corners on the right hand side aren't going to be visible, so that doesn't need to be bothered with. And I'm working out the positioning such that when the strip is fully in, the rocket should be more or less within the confines of the card. The fire actually very slightly overlaps the end, but that doesn't matter too much as long as it still fits in your envelope. Towards the end of creating this card, I actually move it higher still so that there's more of a gap between the rocket and the strip. Now I'm going to create my channel for the slider, and I'm going to use some foam tape But as I want the sentiment strip quite low on the card, I need to cut the foam tape to be narrower. So I put a length of foam tape onto that leftover backing paper from the wide tape I used earlier. That makes it easier to cut because it's not getting stuck to my scissors. And then I was able to trim it in half and adhere that to the bottom of my card. I'll trim off the end of the strip that's past the acetate to make it shorter so that I can fit more foam tape at that end. That will give more support to the piece I'm going to be putting on top of this. And I'll put another piece of foam tape right where the strip ends when the mechanism is all the way in. This prevents it pushing through and falling out the other end. Likewise, I'm going to put a piece on the top left hand side so that the acetate will meet it at the point that the sentiment is fully exposed, and this again makes it so that the strip cannot be pulled all the way out. So those are the most important parts, and you do want to leave that channel to the left of the acetate fully open otherwise. But other than that, you can fill out the rest of the area with foam tape, as you can see here, and here you can see how it slides. At this stage, I had no idea what I was going to put over the top of this. I knew I wanted some kind of moon or planet or something, and I decided off camera whilst my camera was charging to create an alcohol ink background on some vellum. If you'd like to see how to do that, I do have another video that shows using alcohol inks on vellum, and I will link to that in the top right hand corner for you to check out. Here you can see the inks I used. These are Dandelion, Coral, Sunset Orange and Sunshine Yellow, and I also added some foil to that, which is a Gina Fancy Foil. Obviously, being on acetate, this is kind of translucent, and you can see all the foam tape and whatever behind it when you put it in place, and we don't want that. So we're going to fix that by adhering the acetate to a piece of white card. Actually, you could use coloured, you could go with orange or yellow behind this if you want. I would check and see what it looks like before adhering it to the coloured card to be sure that it's how you want, but that is another option. So I'll adhere that into place in much the same way that I adhered the wrapping paper to the card base using the wide tape. Having a full coverage of tape here is really important because otherwise it's going to show through the vellum. I then trimmed the strip down to be the width of the card, and I left it a bit taller than I needed because that gives me a bit of wiggle room for getting it positioned. And I used my scissors just to add a very slight curve, as if it's the curve of a planet, to the top of the panel. Before adhering it in place, I did check and have a look at the positioning, and that's when I decided to move the rocket up just a smidge more. And once I was happy with that, I removed all the backing from the foam tape and carefully adhered my alcohol inked piece into place. And then, of course, I have to have a little play with it and make sure it works properly, which it does, which always makes me very happy when I have success with these kinds of interactive cards. As a finishing touch, I did add a little arrow with some glitter gel pen to the end of that strip, just to make sure it's obvious that you're meant to pull on that so that the recipient does know, yes, this is an interactive card and you can interact with it. I also decided to add some shimmer with the Spectrum Noir sparkle pen. I'm adding that to the glass on the rocket and also to the fire. And just a side note here, you want to be really careful doing this if your ink, like my printer ink, is not waterproof, because you may smudge the lines. And with that done, that finishes my slider card. So that's the third of the 3 interactive cards, and here's another look at how it looks all finished and how the mechanism works. And these cards are so much fun to make and really fun to play with as well. You won't be able to stop playing with these. I certainly couldn't. So here's another quick look at all 3 of them. There's the Monty Monkey card on the wobbler, the Soar Above aeroplane card with the kind of flying interactiveness, and then the Blast Off card on the slider. I hope you enjoyed these birthday cards and that perhaps they will have inspired you. Don't forget that this is part of a video hop, so all the details on that, such as the next place to hop and how to enter the giveaway, all of those are in the description box below. Whilst you're down in the description box, you can also find links to the products used, to my accompanying blog post, my Patreon page and all my social media, so please do check those out. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. You could let me know which of the cards was your favourite and what's your favourite kind of interactive card to create. If you'd like to see more videos from me, don't forget to watch the other videos in the hop first, but then you can come back and watch the videos that are showing on screen now. And if you're not yet a subscriber, you can subscribe to my channel by clicking the subscribe button on screen. Otherwise, I will see you again in the next video. Bye!